The first signs of the predator's arrival were subtle, nearly imperceptible to the untrained eye. At first, it was nothing more than strange gravitational shifts detected at the edge of the solar system, barely enough to raise suspicion. But for Earth's top astronomers and military scientists, it was a warning bell. Within days, the threat became undeniable. Vast, cloaked ships, some the size of small moons, appeared in deep space, slowly drifting toward Earth. These ships didn't hail from any known alien race. They were the Predators, a group of ancient species known throughout the galaxy for their prowess in combat and their insatiable hunger for conquest. Their arrival wasn't a diplomatic mission or a peaceful exploration. It was a hunt. In their long history, the Predators had annihilated countless civilizations, each more advanced than the last. But they had never encountered humanity. From what they had learned about Earth, they believed it to be just another easy target. The human race, while capable of surprising feats, was still primitive in their eyes, splintered by divisions, technological advancements still in their infancy compared to the Predators' vast weaponry. They saw humans as weak, unprepared, and most importantly, defenseless. But Earth was not blind. The first Predator ships that entered the system were immediately detected by Earth's advanced satellite arrays and military sensors. Alarm bells rang through the world's most secure facilities, and governments scrambled to respond. But no one, not even the highest-ranking officials, knew exactly what they were dealing with. There was no protocol for facing an intergalactic predator species, no playbook to counter the arrival of a being that could destroy planets with a flick of their wrist. The human response was chaotic, a mixture of fear, uncertainty, and optimism. With no clear understanding of the threat, Earth's military forces mobilized in haste, launching every defense satellite, fighter craft, and missile defense system at their disposal. At first, it seemed like the Predators might be nothing more than a distant threat, slowly coming closer without any immediate action. But then, they made their move. Without warning, a massive wave of Predator ships broke through the outer rim of the solar system, their sudden acceleration defying human comprehension. They moved faster than anything Earth scientists had ever seen. In an instant, they began striking out against human stations and vessels, disabling communications, and wiping out satellites one by one. The first real test came when a small human space station in orbit around Mars was struck by one of the Predator ships. The station, home to dozens of astronauts and scientists, was obliterated in seconds. No warning, no negotiation, just destruction. The Predators, it seemed, had no need for diplomacy. And then came the first human casualty, humanity's first brush with the harsh reality of what was happening. On Earth, panic spread like wildfire. News outlets ran continuous coverage, showcasing the destruction, but no one had answers. Governments scrambled to organize a defense, but humanity was not prepared for what was coming. The Predators showed no mercy. They were here to hunt, to claim Earth's resources, and to make an example of humankind. But what the Predators didn't understand, what they couldn't have predicted, was the human spirit. Humans, in the face of near-total annihilation, were not broken. They adapted, they rallied, and they fought back. It wasn't just a battle for survival. It was a war for their very existence. In the shadow of the Predator threat, small, unnoticed acts of resistance began. A few ships, too quick and too stealthy for the Predators' slow-moving motherships, began striking at the edges of their fleets. With every attack, humanity learned more about their enemy. The Predators, arrogant in their superiority, didn't take these small attacks seriously. But as their fleet took damage and their forces began to dwindle, a single thought began to grow among the Predators. This would not be as easy as they had assumed. The Predators might have arrived with the intent to conquer Earth, but in the quiet corners of the solar system, they had awoken a force they had never seen before, a force that would prove just how dangerous humanity could be. As the Predators' assault on Earth's outer colonies escalated, something unexpected began to happen. Humanity, initially caught off guard, had started to regroup, and its response was taking shape. The initial waves of attacks by the predators had left Earth in chaos, with communication networks and infrastructure in ruins. But beneath the surface of panic, human ingenuity and resilience were already working overtime. In underground military bunkers and deep space command stations, the world's brightest minds converge. Governments scrambled to share intelligence, pooling their knowledge, resources, and expertise. What they lacked in raw firepower, they made up for in innovation. There was no single unified force on Earth, no one global military, but that was not necessary. What humans had in abundance was something the predators never counted on: collaboration. The first breakthrough came from Earth's defense satellites. While the predators were using advanced cloaking technology to keep their ships hidden, a small group of engineers discovered a flaw in their invisibility systems. The predators' ships might have been invisible to the naked eye, but their massive energy signatures couldn't be completely concealed. By repurposing Earth's existing satellite network to track the slight shifts in gravitational pull and radiation anomalies, the human scientists developed a system to detect the predators' movements with startling accuracy. With this new tool, humanity had an edge. The first successful strike came during a coordinated attack on a predator supply ship just outside the orbit of Jupiter. A small human fleet, using the knowledge gleaned from the satellites, ambushed the ship while it was refueling. The predators, so accustomed to being the hunters, were unprepared for the precision and effectiveness of the human assault. The predators lost one of their key supply lines, which was critical for their long-term strategy, and the loss sent ripples through their command structure. The humans, initially stunned by their own success, took full advantage of the momentum. Despite the difference in technology, humanity's response was not based on brute force. Instead, it was their unpredictability that gave them the upper hand. Humans attacked quickly, efficiently, and then disappeared just as fast, using their knowledge of the solar system and the predators' overconfidence against them. The predators had anticipated a long, drawn-out war, not guerrilla-style tactics from an enemy they had thought too primitive to use such strategies. But it wasn't just military ingenuity that made the difference. The human population itself was beginning to realize the scope of the threat, and the world's response was nothing short of awe-inspiring. From the streets of every major city to the deepest corners of the internet, ordinary people began to contribute in ways that nobody expected. Engineers, hackers, scientists, and civilians all began working together, creating makeshift weapons and providing valuable data to military forces. Even children, inspired by the stories of Earth's great struggles, contributed ideas and solutions that proved surprisingly effective. One of the most notable instances came from a group of high school students who, with the help of retired military veterans, hacked into a predator communication channel. They were able to listen in on the predators' plans, learning vital information about their tactics. This intel led to a major victory, where a fleet of human ships ambushed a massive predator warship, using their knowledge of the predators' battle strategies to outmaneuver them and destroy the vessel. With each victory, humanity's resolve grew stronger, and the predators, once so sure of their dominance, began to feel the sting of vulnerability. The predators had underestimated the power of human adaptability, and with every successful counterattack, they began to realize the truth. This was not a simple conquest. They were facing an enemy that could change tactics in the blink of an eye, a species that could evolve faster than any of them had ever encountered. While the predators regrouped, furious and shaken, humanity's fight was just beginning. The world's best minds were now united in a single goal: to push back the predators and protect their home at all costs. Humans had been underestimating themselves for far too long. Now they would make sure the predators learned what it truly meant to be the prey. The predators, once certain of their supremacy, now found themselves on the defensive. Earth's initial resistance had been brushed off as a mere inconvenience, but now the predators were facing a force that refused to back down. Each attack had become more precise, more calculated, and more deadly. The predators had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt, and now the consequences of that mistake were becoming painfully clear. As the human counterattacks continued, the predators' morale began to erode. For the first time in centuries, their warriors began to question their ability to conquer. The galaxy's most feared hunters were no longer hunting. They were being hunted. The human forces, small in number but large in ingenuity, had learned to exploit the predator's pride and overconfidence. The predator warships, which had once been nearly invulnerable, were now taking heavy damage from human strikes. The predator's first major defeat came during a surprise ambush in the asteroid belt. A small fleet of human ships, using stealth technology derived from their earlier satellite breakthroughs, lured a group of predator vessels into a trap. The human ships, camouflaged behind large asteroids, struck swiftly, taking down 2 predator warships before the predators even had a chance to retaliate. It was a stunning blow to the predator fleet, and the psychological damage was immediate. The predators had not anticipated that their own tactics would be turned against them so effectively. With their pride wounded, the predators gathered in their command ships to discuss their next move. They had never faced an enemy that not only resisted but learned and adapted to their tactics so quickly. The predators, who had once viewed themselves as the apex species of the galaxy, began to question their strategy. Some of their commanders suggested retreat, but the leaders of the Predator Alliance were too proud to admit defeat. Instead, they chose to escalate the war, sending more ships, more warriors, and more advanced weaponry into the conflict. However, this decision only served to fuel humanity's resolve. Rather than cower in fear, the human forces continued to evolve their tactics, using their knowledge of predator weaknesses to stay one step ahead. They had already begun to reverse engineer predator technology, adapting it to their own needs. Human-made weapons were now a mix of old-fashioned ingenuity and high-tech innovations, using the best of both worlds to counter the predator's superior firepower. One particularly shocking moment came when a group of human engineers succeeded in disabling a predator mothership's main shield generator using a hacked version of predator energy weapons. The attack was swift and precise, causing a ripple of panic through the predator ranks. They had believed their shields to be invincible, but the humans had found a way to bypass them, and the predator fleet's once unbreakable defense system was now exposed. With each victory, humanity's confidence grew, and the predator's arrogance began to fade. The predators, who had initially dismissed the human race as weak and easy to crush, were now struggling to maintain control of the war. They began to realize something their leaders had refused to believe from the start. Humanity was not just a defenseless species. They were a force to be reckoned with. The predators, used to being feared and revered across the galaxy, now found themselves in a position they had never imagined, fighting for their survival against a species they had written off as insignificant. But the predators were not ready to admit defeat. They would fight with everything they had, unwilling to acknowledge that their pride had led them to underestimate their prey. Yet every move they made, every force they sent, was countered by humanity's adaptability. And with each setback, the predators grew more desperate, more enraged, and more determined to crush this unexpected threat once and for all. The predators, now shaken by their losses, shifted their strategy. They could no longer rely on sheer force alone. Every time they launched a direct assault, humanity's creativity and unpredictability turned the tide against them. The predators, masters of war in their own right, began to feel like they were playing a game they couldn't control. It was no longer about crushing humanity. It was about survival. In response, the predators adapted, breaking into smaller, faster strike teams and spreading out across the solar system. They sought to use their superior speed and firepower to overwhelm human defenses. It was a new tactic, swift, brutal, and relentless. But the predators had forgotten one important factor. The humans were now playing their own version of the game. Using their growing knowledge of predator technology and their own resourcefulness, humanity began to turn the tables. The humans had learned quickly that they couldn't simply fight the predators head-on. They had to outsmart them. Earth's military and scientific communities worked together, developing a new strategy, one that would turn the predators' arrogance against them. The humans began using the vastness of space to their advantage. Rather than trying to confront the predators directly in open space, they used the asteroid belt, moons, and even the shadow of the gas giants to hide their forces and launch surprise attacks. A group of human ships, painted in the same color as asteroids, would drift in silence for hours, waiting for the predators to move into position. The predators, blinded by their arrogance, didn't think to look for such a strategy, believing their superior technology and advanced sensors could track any movement in the system. But humanity was learning to be patient, calculating their strikes for maximum impact. One of the most successful ambushes came when a group of human ships lay in wait behind the dark side of Neptune. The predators, unaware of the trap, sent a heavily armed warship to patrol the area, thinking it would be a simple mission. But the human fleet, having studied the predator tactics carefully, unleashed a devastating barrage of weaponry at just the right moment. The predator ship never stood a chance. It was obliterated in a matter of seconds, its crew caught completely off guard. The predators had always prided themselves on their ability to track and hunt any enemy, but humans had proven more elusive and dangerous than they had ever imagined. Each strike took a toll on the predator fleet, and as they started to lose ships at a higher rate, their commanders grew increasingly frustrated. What had once seemed like an easy conquest had become a brutal, drawn-out war of attrition. With their forces scattered, the predators turned to more desperate measures. They launched an all-out assault on Earth itself, aiming to strike at the heart of humanity's resistance. But by now, humans had already anticipated this move. Earth's defense systems, built and perfected over the last several months, were ready. The planet was prepared for a full-scale attack, with every satellite, every missile, every laser weapon aimed at the skies. When the predators arrived in orbit, they were met with a barrage of firepower like nothing they had ever encountered. The predators, once the hunters, were now the hunted. As the predator fleet began to retreat from Earth's atmosphere, humanity struck one final blow, using a massive weapon developed from the predator technology they had captured earlier. The weapon, a modified EMP blast, disabled the predator ship systems, leaving them vulnerable and helpless in orbit. The predators had never encountered a foe who could fight so creatively, so unpredictably. Their retreat was not a sign of victory. It was a forced withdrawal. In the aftermath, humanity celebrated their victory. But the predators were not defeated yet. They retreated to lick their wounds, but the humans knew one thing. They had succeeded in proving that no matter how advanced the predator race was, they were not invincible. They had been outsmarted, outmaneuvered, and most importantly, outlasted. Humanity was no longer just the prey. They were a force to be reckoned with. The predators, now aware that their initial approach had failed, were growing desperate. Their once formidable fleet had been steadily chipped away, and humanity's ability to outsmart and outmaneuver them was becoming a thorn in their side. The predators were no longer the invincible conquerors they had once been. Their once unshakable confidence was replaced with a gnawing sense of frustration. For the first time in their long history, the predators were facing an enemy that seemed more capable than any they had encountered before. In a last-ditch effort to regain control, the predators escalated their tactics. They began targeting civilian populations, striking human colonies on the moon and beyond with brutal efficiency. Entire cities were wiped out in the blink of an eye, and the predators made it clear that they would do anything to break humanity's resolve. But what the predators didn't understand was that their cruelty had the opposite effect. Instead of demoralizing humanity, their violent actions only served to unite the human race in a way that had never been seen before. Governments, corporations, and military factions from across the world set aside their differences. The survivors of the moon colony attacks, fueled by grief and rage, became symbols of humanity's resilience. The world stood together in a united front, vowing to end the predators' reign of terror. Volunteers flooded military recruiting centers, scientists and engineers scrambled to develop new technologies, and civilians did their part by offering resources and intelligence. Humanity had found its strength, not in brute force, but in the unity that came from shared purpose and determination. Even the media, once filled with panic and confusion, became an instrument of defiance. Propaganda campaigns spread hope and encouragement, focusing on humanity's victories, no matter how small. Every victory was celebrated, every loss turned into a rallying cry for revenge. The predators had underestimated how quickly humans could recover from tragedy. Each attack, each loss, fueled a fire within humanity's heart that the predators couldn't extinguish. Meanwhile, the predators' own unity was starting to crack. While their commanders demanded more destruction, their warriors began questioning their purpose. The predators had been feared throughout the galaxy for their brutal efficiency and unrivaled strength, but they had never been forced to reckon with a species as adaptable and unyielding as humans. The morale of the predator forces began to dip as they faced more setbacks, and their ranks began to fracture. One of the predator leaders, a veteran of many successful campaigns, began to question the wisdom of the war. Despite the pressure from the higher echelons of the predator hierarchy to continue the assault, he feared that their pride and arrogance had led them to overestimate their own superiority. With every failed mission, every ambush that they walked into, he saw their position growing weaker. And yet, despite these concerns, the predators pressed on, unable to accept defeat. Their arrogance, so deeply ingrained, made it impossible for them to admit they had met their match. As the war dragged on, the predators grew more and more brutal in their attempts to subdue humanity. They launched a devastating surprise attack on Earth's main defense base, the human stronghold in orbit. The attack was swift and vicious, with entire fleets bearing down on the station. But even as the predators launched their most devastating assault, humanity was prepared. Using the knowledge gained from their previous encounters, they activated the ultimate defense, a network of newly built energy shields and a counter-strike weapon that could disable predator ships without a single shot being fired. The predator fleet was caught off guard, and despite their overwhelming numbers, they suffered catastrophic damage. As the surviving ships limped back into deep space, it became clear that the predator's strength was fading. They were no longer the hunters, they had become the prey, and humanity was learning how to hunt them down. In the midst of this chaos, humanity's victory became certain. Every setback for the predators only pushed the human race closer to victory. The predators had underestimated the resilience, ingenuity, and unity of humanity, and now they were paying the price. The war had reached a boiling point. The predators, battered and broken from the constant onslaught, had finally realized they were not invincible. Their once feared fleets, once capable of overwhelming entire systems with ease, were now scattered and struggling to maintain control. The humans, relentless in their pursuit of survival, had proven to be more than just a nuisance. They had become the predators' worst nightmare. In the wake of their failed assault on Earth's orbital defense base, the predators gathered in secret, their high command convening to discuss their next steps. The few remaining predator leaders were divided. Some urged for retreat, suggesting that they abandon their mission to conquer humanity and preserve what was left of their fleet. Others, too steeped in their own arrogance, refused to entertain the thought of retreat. They would not admit defeat, not to this insignificant species, not after all they had already sacrificed. But even as they argued, the predators knew that their window of opportunity was closing fast. Humanity's strikes had become more coordinated, more efficient. What had started as small, scattered attacks had evolved into a global, organized resistance. And more concerning was the realization that the humans were now learning faster than the predators could adapt. Every time the predators thought they had the upper hand, humanity found a way to turn the tables. The tide was shifting, and the predators were beginning to feel it. On Earth, the mood had changed. What began as a desperate fight for survival had evolved into a campaign of hope. Humanity had proven its ability to adapt and outthink its enemies, and now, They were about to take the fight directly to the heart of the Predator forces. Led by a new coalition of military leaders, scientists, and strategists, humanity had formulated a final, risky plan. A direct strike at the Predator's command hub, deep within their fleet. If they could eliminate the heart of the Predator forces, they could cripple their ability to continue the war. But the Predators, ever cunning, had anticipated such a move. They had constructed a massive, heavily guarded flagship at the center of their fleet, a fortress so fortified that it was believed to be impenetrable. To take it down would require more than just brute force. It would require the perfect plan. And the humans, once thought to be mere prey, were now capable of such precision. As the final battle loomed, both sides prepared for what would likely be the last confrontation. The Predators, knowing their strength was failing, had begun to deploy their most dangerous weapons, hoping to catch humanity off guard with their devastating firepower. Massive warships, equipped with energy cannons capable of destroying entire cities, were stationed around the flagship, each one a fortress in its own right. The Predators were determined to use their remaining strength to crush the human resistance once and for all. But humanity was ready. Drawing on everything they had learned from their previous victories, the human forces launched their attack under the cover of a newly developed cloaking technology. The Predator fleet had grown complacent in its dominance, failing to recognize the growing human ingenuity in warfare. As the human ships approached the Predator flagship, the element of surprise was on their side. With precision and timing that left the Predators reeling, they struck the flagship with everything they had, using a combination of electromagnetic pulses, hacking devices, and powerful laser weapons designed to disable Predator shields. The Predator's fortress, once thought invincible, began to buckle under the pressure. For the first time since the war began, the Predator forces were beginning to panic. The flagship, the heart of their empire, was under siege, and the humans were relentless. It was not just a battle for Earth. It was a fight for the very survival of humanity. And this time, the Predators were no longer the apex hunters. They were the ones being hunted. The Predator flagship shuddered under the first wave of human fire, its once impenetrable shields flickering as electromagnetic pulses disrupted their systems. Inside, the Predators scrambled to respond, but their military pride was no match for the relentless creativity and coordination of the human forces. The flagship, meant to be the symbol of Predator dominance, was now crumbling under a storm of human ingenuity. For the first time in the war, the Predators were on the defensive. The humans had perfected their strategy of precision strikes, exploiting every weakness in the Predators' once mighty defenses. What had once been an unstoppable force was now struggling to hold its ground against a species that had learned to fight not only with technology, but with strategy, psychology, and sheer determination. The humans had breached the flagship's outer defenses, and now, with everything on the line, they moved in for the kill. In the heart of the ship, the Predator command center was in chaos. The lead commander, once so confident in their superiority, now stared in disbelief as human soldiers infiltrated the flagship's most secure corridors. What had once been an impenetrable stronghold was no longer a fortress. It was a death trap, and humanity was closing in on its prize. The Predators had tried everything to push back the attack, from deploying elite warriors to activating their last-ditch superweapons, but nothing could stop the human advance. Every Predator weapon seemed to fall short, every tactic countered with ingenuity that the Predators simply could not predict. The humans had turned the tide of war, and the Predators could feel it slipping through their claws. As the human forces pushed deeper into the flagship, they reached the central command room. The Predator commander, a towering figure whose battle scars were legendary, stood in defiance, surrounded by his most trusted officers. He refused to surrender, refusing to accept that the Predator Empire, the pride of the galaxy, could be undone by a species they had once considered prey. But the humans were not here to negotiate. They were here to end the war once and for all. The final confrontation between the Predator leader and the human forces was brutal. The Predator commander fought with every ounce of strength, every ounce of arrogance he had, but it was clear that the tide had turned. His warriors, once feared for their savage combat skills, were scattered, defeated, or fleeing. Humanity had become the unstoppable force. In a final, desperate move, the Predator commander attempted to launch a catastrophic counterattack, triggering the ship's self-destruct sequence. But the human engineers, working with precision, hacked into the system just in time, overriding the countdown. The Predator flagship was now in humanity's control. As the flagship fell into human hands, the remaining Predators were in disarray. Their forces had been decimated, their leadership shattered. With their command hub destroyed, the Predator fleet began to fracture. Some ships attempted to flee, but they were hunted down by the human forces, who had now become experts in the art of war. The Predators, once feared as the ultimate hunters, were being hunted by the very species they had sought to destroy. The human victory was not just tactical, it was symbolic. It was a message to the galaxy, to every race that had ever underestimated humanity. The Predator Empire, which had existed for centuries, was crumbling, its warriors retreating or surrendering. The Predators had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt, to evolve, to fight back. They had never imagined that their greatest strength would be turned into their greatest weakness. On Earth and across the colonies, celebrations erupted. The war that had once seemed unwinnable, that had driven humanity to the brink of extinction, was now over. The Predators had fallen, not through brute force, but through the strength of the human spirit, ingenuity, and unity. The war was over, and the galaxy would never be the same. Humanity, once regarded as fragile and insignificant, had triumphed over the Predators, the galaxy's most feared and powerful race. The Predators, shattered and broken, retreated into the dark corners of space, their once mighty empire crumbling to dust. The few remaining Predator ships, barely functional and leaderless, scattered across the cosmos, their long reign of terror coming to a sudden, ignoble end. On Earth, the celebrations were unlike anything the world had ever seen. It wasn't just a victory over an alien enemy. It was a victory of survival, of unity, and of hope. In the aftermath of the battle, humanity had proven that they were not merely a species to be preyed upon. They were a force to be reckoned with. No longer would they be seen as weak or defenseless. They had stood against a superior power and had not only survived, but prevailed. The political landscape of Earth had been forever altered. Governments that had once operated in isolation now came together, forging alliances that transcended old borders. The war effort had united nations and corporations in a way that no global crisis had before. A new era of global cooperation emerged, with shared goals and a renewed focus on scientific advancement, military preparedness, and interstellar exploration. Humanity's victory had shown the world what they could accomplish when they worked together, and they were determined to build a future founded on that strength. In the aftermath, Earth's leaders began to discuss the future, both of their world and of their place in the greater galaxy. The Predator technology they had seized during the war was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. Scientists and engineers worked tirelessly to reverse engineer the alien technology, incorporating it into their own advancements. The knowledge they gained from the war pushed humanity's technological progress forward by leaps and bounds, especially in the fields of space travel, weaponry, and energy production. Humanity was no longer on the defensive. They were on the offensive, armed with knowledge and power that could change the course of history. But humanity was not blinded by their victory. Leaders and strategists knew that the Predators, while defeated, were not entirely gone. They were a powerful force, and though their empire had fallen, the remnants of their species still lingered in the depths of space. The humans were determined to prevent any future threat, not just from the Predators, but from any race that would seek to harm them. The lessons learned from the war would not be forgotten. Humanity's victory was more than just a military triumph. It was a symbol of resilience, adaptability, and the power of unity. The Predators had believed they were the ultimate hunters, destined to dominate the galaxy. But humanity had shown them that even the most fearsome predators could be brought down by an unwillingness to be defeated, a will to survive, and the unbreakable bond forged between humans during the darkest days of the war. As humanity moved forward, they set their sights on the stars. They knew the galaxy was vast, and countless new challenges awaited them. But now, humanity faced the future with the confidence that they had not just survived the predator's attack. They had outgrown their place as prey and ascended to a position of power and influence. The universe was no longer a realm to fear. It was one to explore, to understand, and most importantly, to shape. The dawn of a new era had begun, and humanity, no longer the hunted, had become the hunters.